Welcome back to episode number 34 of the Redman Group Live, brought to you in Orlando, Florida, via 21 Studios. This is a awesome little setup we have today, isn't it, gentlemen?
Yes. Oh yeah,
fantastic. So we just finished up the 21 convention, 4 days of awesomeness. If you guys missed out, we hope to see you next year. It's a great event for men, help you become a better version of yourself, and really up your game in life. So let me introduce the panel that we have today. We're doing 3 broadcasts. This is the first of 3. They're going to run for about 90 minutes. We're going to move into the standard Q&A halfway through. We have a live audience right now today who bought into the VIP package, so they're here with us sitting out front, so we'll have a mic going around. We won't have a call-in segment, but you can ask questions in the chat, or if you're so inclined, you can donate a super chat, which is always appreciated. I'll start from my left over here. We've got Doc Smith, DocSmith.co, clinical psychologist from Denver, Colorado. One of the speakers this year. Tactical Guide to Women is his book. I've recommended it a number of times. It's on my list of top 7 books you guys want to check out. Ryan Stone of the Merry Red Pill, also a speaker this year at the 21 convention. Smashing guy and always the best dressed on the panel. To my left, I've got Socrates of Manning Up Smart. He's been here from the get-go, from the ground of the 21 Studios setup, and he's a great friend to Anthony and to all the men on this panel. We're grateful to see him again, for another year. To my right, we've got Donovan Sharp of the Sharp Reality. You guys should all be familiar with him. He's a regular panelist on the Redman Group. We've got Hunter Drew after that from the Family Alpha. What's the website?
TheFamilyAlpha.com.
TheFamilyAlpha.com. Hunter's a really cool guy. He, of course, second year back, he did his talk again. High energy. He's the guy that's going to hold you accountable. Solid dude. And of course, to the far right, we've got the Godfather, Red Pill, Rollo Tomasi of the Rational Male blog. Gentlemen, I introduce to you the Avengers of the Red Pill.
Yes.
So let's kind of, rather than what we've been up to, because I think everybody knows what we've been up to. We've been here at the conference in Orlando. Let's kind of catch up on what our experience has been like attending and talking to a lot of the attendees. I know a lot of us are kind of low on vocal effort today.
Capacity.
My eyes are a little cooked from staring at these bright lights. But what's your experience like? Do you want to start?
Well, I'm glad we're doing this right now, because I think this sort of personalizes the whole experience of the 21 convention. It's like we finally become the Red Pill Summit that I knew that this whole thing could be. And with the selection of speakers this year is just phenomenal. Some of these guys I'm meeting for the first time who I've known since, maybe 10 or 12 years ago. Ed Lattimore was here. Hanging out with Ed was great. Jack Murphy, who I have known since, probably 2012 maybe. And, hanging out with him and just sort of getting to know guys that I know already, but actually becoming face-to-face friends with these guys. That's an incredible experience. And then just the people. I mean, it's all about guys coming to this this convention and wanting to be a better version of themselves, like you're saying. But it's you get to hear everybody's individual stories. And it's like a lot of these guys follow me on Twitter, or else they read my books or whatever. And it's one thing to get an email and say, hey, you saved my life, but it's another thing to have somebody come up to you and say, hey, like last night, I had a couple come up to me and say, we flew out here. It's an older couple. We flew out here just to say, thank you for giving us our son back. And it was like an older married couple, like 70 some odd years old, and they caught me out in the valet out there. And that was I tweeted this out last night too, and I said that's just one of many experiences. But that you don't, when you're typing stuff and you're just in your own little world, and it's very introverted, and you're in your studio and you're working and stuff, and it seems like a big extroversion, and you don't really understand the interactions that you're having and the lives that you're affecting, and this is a really good venue for that. So for me, it's been really personal for me. I mean, this year's been very personal for me. I mean, what we did last year as well.
Yeah.
And this year's been personalized quite a bit, and it's coming into its own, I think.
I'd love to hear the personal stories. Like, we've all been approached and spoken to by, people that are fans of our work, individually and collectively. But I'd love to hear like a quick soundbite if everybody's got one, Hunter.
Yeah, well, my voice is go ahead.
No, this year it's incredible. This is my second time speaking here, and it's like everything. Every standard was raised, from the production, the entire crew that's been here, but also the attendees. The first year it seemed like everybody, they'd come up to you and they'd try to get everything out, their system. They'd word vomit their whole life story in those 30 seconds. They're like, what do you think? And this year the guys are coming, they're very focused. They're like, look, I'm working on this. What do you think about that? And I'm listening to them talk to the other speakers, and it was much more, hey, here's a real specific problem. Let's work on that, a specific answer to that. And it seems as though, the content that's going out is really hitting all those different messages. And you're talking about, the sound bites when we're out there, walking the streets and just having dinner with these guys. And they're opening up. They're realizing, like, this is what I need. And one of the guys said is, like, this is what I'm trying to form. This is what I'm trying to find. Being able to sit down, have a discussion that goes beyond what's on the news today, or beyond, what's the new TV show. Right. Like, let's go a little bit deeper. Let's peel back that onion to where, when you cut an onion, that first layer doesn't get you. It's once you go to that third or fourth, you're like, oh man, that's some deep shit. So it's great to see the guys go into that level and being able to get that out of this, take it home.
Yeah. Donovan?
Yeah, the convention has been great for me. I've never been in a situation where, people come up and talk to me where they knew who I was, but I didn't know who they were. And it's kind of surreal, it's one thing to have your own show and to do the Red Man Group every Saturday, but to actually meet some of the people that you're helping, some of the people that you're actually communicating with on a daily and weekly basis. There's something to be said about that, to be able to see us and touch us and listen to everyone, and just like Hunter said, just to be able to hear the stories. Guys come to me all the time. Donovan, your story resonated with me. I too made the same mistakes. I think something else that's really important is the fact that I think we all acknowledge that we're all far from perfect. I mean, Rollo's the Godfather. He's probably
I'm not perfect.
He's the Godfather, don't. But again, we all have our faults, we all have our frailties, we all have our stories, and at the end of the day, there's really nothing special about any of us. Only that we made the decision to be who we are. So if anyone's watching, we're not special. We're we're the Avengers, but with the quote unquote Avengers, but it's only because we
didn't make that up. Somebody else did.
Yeah, we need to come up with a short video like Marvel does. I don't know.
Assemble.
Anyway,
Some B-roll from the event and kind of slash it together.
If you decide to be the man that you want to be, this is obviously the first step, but you have to take that first step. The only difference between us up here and you guys watching is our decision. That's it.
Yeah, and for me, it's just bonkers because it's like you can put all kinds of content throughout the year. I know some guys here are writers, others talk to cameras. I'm the guy that talks to a camera, and it's like you don't have the direct interaction. So when you come down to a place like this and people say I'm here because of you, and you put this little dent in my universe. But there was two guys that really pulled on my heartstrings big time. There was one guy that was a plastic surgeon. Who does reconstruction on, people that have been injured. And there's a couple times throughout the year where he's had guys that have held a gun up to their chin and they did it wrong and they blew their face off and out. And he was showing me pictures. And these were guys that were, in their 40s. They've gone through the divorce machine. They had an awful experience and they just wanted to check out. And they did it wrong. And he's got to fix their face. And then within the same night, there was another dude that came up to me and said, thank you, because I had the gun in my mouth. And it was because of a video that you put out on surviving divorce and understanding that there's an other side to that I took it out of my mouth and put it down. So it's big. I mean, it's really nice to see that you have an impact on people's lives when they approach you and they shake your hand and they have that kind of tear kind of running, in their eye and it's about to drop. It's massive. So, Sock?
Yeah, I can echo the same things, but what I'm thoroughly kind of impressed with is having done this probably 5 or 6 times now, is seeing the return attendees coming back, whether it was last year and seeing the massive improvements you're seeing in their lives, but the significant ones are the ones that are coming back 2 years later, 3 years later, and seeing how much further that convention back in 2012 or 14 or whatever it was has impacted their lives up to this point. You're seeing a much longer change in their life and life trajectory as far as that impact and how they carried that and felt the need to come back again to recharge, resharpen the axe, and to carry themselves forward even more. And what they're anticipating coming off this convention going forward is a lot more than what they had anticipated even with the first one they attended to. So it really is a springboard for life and for projecting your life forward and where you want that to go. So it's really, really cool to see how that's impacted other people.
Yeah, solid. Ryan?
So the weird thing, first off, I didn't smoke or drink last night. I don't know why I feel hungover, but whatever. So for the conference altogether, it was cool. You gave me all the points and asked, did I think anything wasn't up to snuff or wasn't a 10 out of 10? I'd say everything here is pretty bang on, nothing to improve. Now, having said that, when you take the whole event, I find us up here speaking to be the least valuable part of that. It's the acta non verba, actions not speaking. It's the after party stuff. It's the fact that at breakfast you can come down, and it's kind of like being in a small town. You go, oh, hey, Tanner, how's it going? And you sit down, have some breakfast. Yeah, come on, join. And it's kind of just sitting there and chilling with a bunch of guys talking about your day. Or in the evenings there. I mean, we had one where it was a bar hopping night, and it was a bunch of guys going out. Like if anybody here has been part of a rugby team or any kind of sports team and you have your pub crawls, it's pretty much like that. So maybe some guy who's never had that in his life gets to experience that firsthand, so he sees what it's like. So he takes it back to his buddies. They go have some down there, and they have fun like guys usually do. And I was mentioning it to you earlier, like the house party. It's just such a simple thing. Come over to my house, have some drinks. I'm sure we could have it here in like a conference room, which would be kind of stale and like a networking event. Instead, it's just like every house party I've been to. There's 20 guys, and like 19 of them are in the kitchen hanging around.
Yeah, it was super intimate. Like, Socrates invited us all to his house. He opened up his home to us.
So if you can imagine 125 guys in your house, and you being the guy who's never been to a party like that, walking in and seeing a house party raging, knowing you're welcome and accepted, and being able to throw yourself in the middle of that, I think is terribly powerful for a lot of guys.
Yeah, and it was a beautiful space too. Like one of the things that I thought was great was his daughter was just kind of like running around and just being playful in a pretty little dress sort of thing too. Yeah.
All the guys, she's flirting with all the guys, and they're picking her and giving her and to sit down and say, yeah, you got to make the world a better place with all really good men, and this is how you get it, because eventually I'm going to throw her out into the world, and I want to make sure that it's going to be receptive to her, and it starts at home.
Yeah, so that's the part I found the best, the actions part. So even here when we're saying, actions over words, but we're up here giving an hour-long speech, there's still actions afterwards. And I think that's the part that I enjoyed the most, and I think others will probably glean the most value from.
Yeah. Dr. Smith.
Well, yeah, somebody who's passing through and hopefully get to pass through again. I was shocked at what I saw this weekend. All the presenters and all of the attendees that I talked to, just squared away, solid guys. I've never seen a group of guys like this before, all in one place, motivated, out there making things happen in the world, coming here to find out how to make their relationships work better, how to make their lives work better. And I just feel privileged that I got to be a little part of that and meet some of these guys that showed up to this. Pretty amazing event.
All right, so today's topic is slated to be on Red Pill Rage. It is a stage that a lot of men kind of go through, and somebody can correct me if they've got a different interpretation, but essentially, most men are led to like the awakening through trauma. Sometimes it's going through the divorce machine, sometimes it's heartbreak, it's one-itis for a girl that they want back, that they're pining for. It's usually trauma that leads men to search for information that kind of helps them reconcile that and come to an understanding. Men are deductive, rational, reasoning beings, so that's usually what they go looking for. And then what tends to end up happening is they'll take that proverbial red pill, and then they'll get mad. I didn't have that experience. Like my awakening was kind of like it was long overdue, and it was on the recommendation of reading Rollo's first book. And it was just like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And it was actually a calming effect for me. But if I missed any of that from your experiences, gentlemen, on Red Pill Rage, I'd love to hear you kind of touch up on it. But then I want to throw it over to Doc Smith because he's a clinical guy, right?
Yeah, I'm always interested to know what Doc Smith's going to talk about stuff because he's got that clinical background. It's like I hope I'm hitting the right things because when I talk about like the 5 stages of unplugging, it's really the stages of grief. And all I did was take that, when you're dealing with death, pretty much, you go through, I forget the stages. It's like, anger, denial,
negotiation.
Yeah, negotiation and acceptance and that kind of stuff. And the reason I went to that to sort of claim that as the 5 stages of unplugging is because your old self is literally dying. Like your old beta way is the way. I mean, you can't unsee what you've seen. And they always say, once you unplug, there's no going back, right? And so even if you go into complete denial, you're still seeing things that's going on around in your periphery. And you still see things, in your social circles, political, whatever, we're all so interconnected today. It's almost impossible not to see something that aligns with what it is that we talk about when we talk about red pill awareness. It's so much bigger than just like, oh, I learned how to deal with girls. No, it's a lot bigger than that. And so part of that is anger. And it's kind of been euphemized, I guess, is that the term? It's a euphemism to say a red pill rage or something like that. And I think that gets sort of taken out of context, because when I say, guys get angry as part of those stages of grief, they're not getting angry at women. I mean, some guys do. They stay and they kind of fester in that one stage, but most guys come out of that and realize that they can't live like that the whole time, and they kind of move on to acceptance and then actually finding hope within that. I've got a great post called New Hope, where I say, you're never going to be able to satisfy those blue pill ideals and goals with red pill awareness. But the good news is that in that red pill paradigm, you can build a new life, you can build new hope, you can have new ideals that are based on a more realistic way of seeing the world when it comes to intersexual dynamics, and then you can build from there. And I think it's even more hopeful because you have a playbook, at least. You have some kind of map to show you what's going on and what your old part of it was. But that rage or that anger that everybody loves to harp on all the time, that anger really is an anger at oneself. And I say that because it's an anger at having wasted so much time. Yeah. So when a guy gets to be about 30, I mean, I'm dealing with guys, and Dr. Sean knows what I'm talking about here. I'm dealing with guys who are in their 70s, and they're just waking up. They're what we call awakened while married, right?
Yeah.
And so imagine you're 70 years old and you're waking up to red pill awareness, and you're becoming, you're shocked. I almost think it's almost unfair to unplug somebody once they get past a certain age, because
they go with the anti-boomer
stuff. They can't deal with it. Yeah, and so there is that anger part, and some guys, yes, they do get stuck in that because they can't figure out how to cross over from those blue pill dreams and ideals into a more productive red pill paradigm, because they're looking back at their lives going, I can't believe I married so-and-so when I should have known better. And so they're not angry at women. They're angry at, maybe they're angry at the system, maybe they're angry at the
they're angry at the lies.
They're angry at the lies, and then they're angry at themselves for not having seen it or for wasting so much time. And so, you're going to get angry, and that's going to be a phase. Yeah. So what you do with that, and what I'm not a proponent for saying, we can all just be content with what we have. No, I don't think human beings are content at all. I think we're the state of humanity is being discontent. So even when we get the greatest achievement, when you get that degree or whatever it is that you've been working for so long, there's always something else that's after that. Even Jack
the Overton
Donovan,
window just keeps changing once you have what you want.
Jack Donovan was talking about that in his speech, where it's like once you get to one level, there's always something else that's going. It's like the Aurora Boreas or whatever, the snake eating its tail,
itself,
and there's always something else. It's like you're not just trying to get to the next weekend. There's something else. There's always something going. I think that's really kind of a statement on humanity. And so when guys look back on that wasted time, then they get upset. Yeah, they get really pissed off. And I've talked to several, people or men at this conference. I've said, I was angry for a long time, and then I got your book, and then I understand how I can build with that. Right. They get angry at me for not giving them this 12-step perspective or some sort of formula. And I said, the formula is unique to each and every one of you. All I do is give you the tools. You got to go take that and build something from the tools that I give you. And some guys are better at that than others.
Is there any like experiences you guys have had where you're talking to guys and like the rage is not tied into you know, past relationships with like an ex-wife or a girlfriend or heartbreak or one-itis, like
Me.
yeah.
I'm the only guy. I think I'm one of like the few guys here who wasn't red pilled by a woman. For me, it was from the military. But I mean, I had one-itis, same as anybody else. It's just instead of with a set of tits, it had a bayonet, so whatever.
So, Sean, like when it comes to your practice, I mean, it's for the most part, it's like, you know, guys failing to have their ego investments in the opposite sex met. I mean, like we're told from a very small age, you know, women are sugar and spice and all things nice, and they can't possibly do anything that might violate that. Like, what's that been like for you in your practice since you kind of started getting into the community and paying attention to the sorts of things that we chat about?
Well, I'm meeting a lot more guys that are facing these kind of questions, like the world isn't what I thought it was with women. And,
yeah, like
and
a safe place
Yeah,
theory.
most
Like,
of
what
us-
did you call it?
I call it safe world theory, and I
Safe
don't know if
world
I
theory,
made
yeah.
that up. I don't think I made that up, but there's this idea in psychology that most people walk around in the world with this false belief that the world is a safe place and that they're not going to get in a car accident, they're not going to get cancer, the grid's not going to go down. All the terrible things that can happen to you, we don't think about them typically until they start to happen to us. And you know, psychologists are a little different. I'll talk about psychologists for a minute. Psychologists are kind of fascinating because they're good people. I love psychologists. More than probably most other careers, we're very red-pilled about life in general. Like, because of the things that we see, we're very aware that terrible things could happen to us. Like I go through the world with a smile on my face. I'm a pretty relaxed guy, but I know that I could have cancer in my body right now. I know that my wife could be at home with Chad right now. I don't think she is, but it could happen. And the reason I know these things is because I see it all the time. So when you become a psychologist, you walk around with, you know, your blinders get ripped off, and mine were ripped off pretty young, which is probably why I think I became a psychologist. But there's this interesting thing in my career where gender dynamics, they're not what most of us think they are. Like everybody up here knows, we've been talking about that a lot this week in gender dynamics, and psychologists have kind of a blind spot about that. They're very naive about certain aspects of gender dynamics, and it's because of the questions that we look at are all sort of female-centric. We assume that relationships work the way we've been taught, this what you call a blue pill paradigm about gender dynamics, and so whereas psychologists are very realistic about most of the things that can happen to you in life, they're unrealistic about some of the problems that men face when men come through the door and they've been through the family court meat grinder. And if you don't have the right psychologist or therapist, if you're trying to get through that and you enlist somebody, there's a really good chance you're going to come across somebody who doesn't know what the male experience of that is. So I'm losing track of your question, but my point is that there's, you know, what is the experience of dealing with guys who are going through this from a clinical perspective? Well, people come through my door from all kinds of perspectives who've discovered that the world is a dangerous and unfair place, and this is one aspect of it. And so one of the fascinating questions is, what's the difference between a guy who can go through the family court meat grinder and just bounce right back, and a guy who gets really knocked off his pins? And I don't think it's a question of strength or weakness. But there's an interesting question. I'm going to stop talking now because I'll go all
Do you think
day
it's
on this.
tied into dealing with rejection? Do you think, like, you know, like a guy that's more able to deal with rejection in his life can pop back up quicker versus the guy that gets knocked down and can't get back up or has a hard time getting back up? Or
Yeah, I think you're talking about coping skills there. So
Yeah.
temperament and coping skills. So temperament is what you're born with. Coping skills is what you learn as you go along. And some guys, based on their upbringing, they're pretty comfortable with people saying no to them. And for some guys, that's the end of the world. That represents some kind of massive rejection. But then there's also temperament, just how you're wired anxiety-wise. You know, are you some people, some human beings are more equipped to just bounce back when bad things happen to them. There's a great book out there, and I'll end on this. It's called The Survivor Personality. And it's by Al Siebert. He looks at the difference between people who go through horrible things, talking like concentration camps and horrible car accidents where they get maimed for life and that sort of thing. And he looks at this question, what's the difference between somebody who walks it off and what's the difference between somebody who really gets sucked into it? They become alcoholic, they become depressed, they go down a really dark path. And the first thing that he writes about, and the most important rule, is an acceptance that the world is an unfair place. and being okay with that. And then if you want to take it one step further, you can say that the world is an unfair place, and that's actually a good thing, because every time something unfair happens to me, I have the opportunity to get a little bit stronger.
Yeah, anti-fragility, right?
I'll jump in really quick.
Yeah,
I've actually seen a number of guys who have approached red pill awareness not from a standpoint of trauma or breakup or relationship-wise. It's looking at culture at large and going with this notion of feminism and equality and kind of believing that blue pill kind of wisdom, and then applying it to reality and realizing that there's a massive disparity between what's being sold and then what is. And then in reflection of that, when you talk about gender politics and identity and culture and politics, is that when it becomes gender specific, they start to take a look at it. And when that becomes aware, they start going down that rabbit hole. And the further away they get, it's appropriate to get upset when you see an injustice. And then when one's aimed at you, it becomes personalized. And I think it's terribly unempathetic to point to somebody and say, this is red pill rage, yet at the same time, women wearing pussy hats, screaming and yelling and flopping to the ground.
what the hell is that?
In full rage.
That's okay.
That's self-actualization. That's justified. And coming from the most empathetic sex, supposedly, I find that terribly unempathetic. And so I've seen that. And of course, when you compound that with, hurt and trauma, and particularly if you're going through a custody case with children, it is going to become even more disparaging. And a lot of times I think what this rage is justifiable rage. And anger and hurt and harm being expressed, and it's terribly unempathetic.
I always say that anger is a legitimate response in the face of injustice, right? So it's okay to get angry. It's just what are you going to do with that anger, and how are you going to
social
the
aspect.
end, right?
I was going to say, and maybe Sean can back me up on this. There is a phenomenon. It's I believe it's Evo Psych, where it's what's called the male anger bias, and what that means is that in our evolutionary past, it served the survival function to presume that a male was angry at you, and it was like erring on the side of safety. So anything that looks like male anger, it's that response, and that's a part of our evolved mental firmware. That's one of the reasons why women see. They misinterpret.
So are
anger.
you saying that women are predisposed to seeing men as angry? Is that
yes? Well, women and children as well too, because it served a survival function in our past to presume that a male was going to be angry no matter what, and that
that's actually an interesting statement, because I think if we put it out to the panel, I mean, did every guy think that their father was more angry than their mother growing up? Like he was always the authority.
No.
That's not the question. Like, oh shit, dad's home. Oh crap, I better clean up whatever I was supposed to do, right?
Yeah, there's always going to be that male anger bias, and what happens is when feminism and the feminine imperative takes that and they run with it, and they say, well, this is how they characterize male anger as being destructive and being misogynistic and being evil. But then when a woman is angry, they call that transformative. They say, well, it's something that women don't do naturally, and it's great that they're embracing their anger, because you need to get angry, because if you're not outraged, then you're not paying attention. That trope. So it's
just like how they're angry so they can feel something.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like they have some sort of justification for anger. And okay, I mean, I can understand if you're dealing with an inherently unjust system or an unjust circumstance and you get angry, great, but don't say your anger is more legitimate than my anger just because.
Well, that's the thing too, because
you have a vagina.
Yeah, because I have a vagina.
Yeah, right. It has a point. Like if you drop a hammer on your foot, you get pain, but you don't get anger. There's a social thing. If somebody drops it on your foot, then you're angry because this guy, I have perceived an injustice that this guy put on me, and that's the anger part for guys. Mm-hmm. And sure, it may not have been intentional, and I think that's where you kind of, like you blame people, but ultimately you blame yourself for buying it. Mm-hmm. Because everybody tells you all these things because they believe in them, even though they're not true, and so you get angry over that because this guy screwed me over. They call that the Disney fantasy. Mm. And so once you get past that and you realize people just don't know any better, I find that's where the anger kind of dissipates, and then you take it to motivation.
And I think, to add to what Ryan is talking about, I think the anger phase, in terms of the red pill awakening, I think it's the most dangerous phase. Not for fear of a guy, shooting up a school or shooting up a shopping mall, but anger, a lot of guys never make it out of the anger phase. A lot of guys stay angry, and they end up in the basement. living with their mom. I mean, we all know the archetype. Lives with his mom, has a neck beard, has a blow up. She lives with me, right? I don't live with my mom. She lives with me. Right, exactly. But men who get stuck in the anger phase become what we call incels, or I think as we sort of loosely define them as low-level MGTOWs. They've sworn off all. They don't want anything to do with women outside of just work. They don't want any sort of romantic relationship with them. They don't want to pursue one-night stands. Don't even think about marriage. And they all come with the same rhetoric. It's all this other kind of stuff. The juice, right? The juice isn't worth the squeeze, exactly. But I think it's exactly what Ryan says. As soon as you figure out, like I was angry with my parents for a long time because we all are, right? But when you have that awakening and you realize, you know what? Wait a minute, parents are people too. That's when you begin to realize that parents are fallible. And the people who told us, they gave us this Disney rom-com fantasy, they believed it too. Even though it wasn't working out, they believed it too. So only then when you figure out that they didn't sell you a bad bill of goods on purpose. They did it because they thought what they were doing was right. Only then when you realize that they didn't do it on purpose, that's when, just like Ryan said, the anger starts to dissipate, and then you can start to move forward and grow.
And when you bring up, it's the most dangerous, it's also the most necessary.
Oh,
I'm
absolutely,
Mr.
yeah.
Optimism, always bringing out, like, let's go get it, guys, but it's absolutely necessary to go through that. Sometimes you should be angry. Like your guys were saying, you can't just send energy into the world, you're just raging.
Right.
You got to channel it. All right, I'm pissed off, that sucks. But hey, you can't go back to how the world was. It's not going to be what you want it to be.
Right.
It is what it is. Just embrace that and go forward. Everybody used to be somebody. And you start telling the stories of, back in my day, I was a high school football stud. Yeah, but right now you're 45, you haven't lifted a weight in like 5 years. What's going on now? Like, who are you today? Right. And you've got to channel, like, just because you had your glory days, you still are here. You can use that, take off the blinders, take off, your Disney, the Disney story that you're trying to have going on. You've got to embrace how life is, how reality is. You've got to use that anger that, it might fucking suck, it hurts, but you use that to go forward. Use it as fuel as opposed to anchor.
So I think that's an interesting point because there's this thought in evolutionary psychology that depression serves an adaptive purpose. Mm-hmm. That when something happens to you in the world, that one of the things we are predisposed to do is slow ourselves down. So something bad happens, we get depressed, meaning we slow ourselves down, we retreat, we go back into the cave, go back to the house, whatever it is, and that keeps us from re-injuring ourselves. This is the thought, it's theoretical. But that act of getting depressed and retreating serves the purpose of keeping us from going back out and doing the same thing that we just did and getting hurt again because we slow down, we start processing, we internalize. And so I wonder if there's something analogous with this red pill rage that we're discussing here, where a guy retreats into the basement, he gets mad, and what sits behind that anger is being pretty depressed, that this world isn't what I thought it was. So you get depressed, you go through that first necessary stage of slowing down, not going out re-injuring yourself. But then with any kind of anxiety disorder or depression, the mistake is then not moving past it, which I think is essentially what you're saying is, all right, you had your depression, you had your anxiety, you had your red pill rage, whatever it was. Now you got to start writing a story about what just happened so that you can go back out into the world and engage in the world and be happy about it with this new reality.
And women will try to disarm men by attempting to shame you with the question, who hurt you? Yeah. Right? Oh, no, I'm not angry. Nobody hurt me. No, yeah, I am pissed off. And yeah, I've been hurt by multiple women. And it's as though they see the blinders coming off of men, and they're doing their level best to make sure the blinders stay back on. So what they do is they shame us they shame us by calling us angry and bitter. And being bitter, you can call it whatever you want, but being bitter to me is an unwelcome byproduct of a hard lesson learned. And we talk about you put your hand on the stove, you get it burnt, you're not going to put your hand on the stove again. It's a pretty good analogy, but it's not really accurate because there is no benefit to putting your hand on the stove. Nobody's going to put their hand on the stove. The reason why we pursue relationships with women for all of the risks is because there are some benefits. A lot of guys like to liken relationships to Russian roulette. Well, why would you play Russian roulette? If you win, you live. That's status quo. But if you have a successful relationship with a woman, you get regular sex, you get kindness, femininity, deference, et cetera, et cetera. So I think when women, particularly feminists, promiscuous women, I guess, to clean it up, I think the reason why they try to shame us is because they don't want us to see what's really going on. They want to continue to have the tremendous upper hand that they have in terms of the sexual dynamics between men and women. And guys like us, we're not here for that.
See, that's why I say you're not bitter, you're savory.
Ego?
Say that again?
Do you have a fragile ego?
I don't know.
Who hurt you?
'Cause, I mean, that's the other one, you know.
Oh,
Besides
of course.
who hurt
Yeah.
you. What I want to do, guys, because we're going to start taking questions in about 15 minutes. We're running these for about 90 minutes apiece, just to kind of keep us on track. Before we start taking questions, I'm going to assume one of the biggest questions is how do you deal with red pill rage? So it's not really my wheelhouse. I kind of talk about a lot of other things, and my advice in that area probably isn't as useful as some of the guys in the panel. So I want to throw it out there to you guys, whoever wants to hop in first. How would you tell a guy to deal with red pill rage?
Well, first of all, understand what you think is red pill rage might not necessarily be red pill rage. It might be what outside influences are telling you. I constantly get this from feminists or from female critics who are saying you guys are just a bunch of angry young men, angry old men.
Angry old men trying to say alpha is my favorite one.
Do I look angry to you?
But see, it's this idea that whatever doesn't fit in their ideological compartment, that's got to be anger. Or if they disagree, like you can be as objective and as honest, and you can be as tight with your citing sources, and you can say, okay, like I've done this hundreds of times with my articles. People will say, well, you only wrote that because you're bitter and you're angry. Or I get women who will say, you have a good message, but if you would just change the tone.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, it's not the tone that is upsetting you. It's the information that is upsetting you. It's not that I said something in a particular way. It's
What is their
I
complaint
say.
about the tone?
Well, it's usually like, if I'm talking about something I say, I'm talking about something scientific. I'm talking about like hypergamy or something like that. Then they'll say, you would have a lot more women would be on board with what you're saying if you would just soften your approach. I'm like,
That's the goal.
Let me control your
exactly.
mentality. Let me
And I'm
control
like,
your
well, I don't know
water
how.
down.
I take, and everybody knows this. I take a pretty clinical approach when I'm writing things.
Surgical.
And so I don't know how much more, how much more softening of the message that I can get without that. And then I came to the realization that it's not how I'm saying something, it's what I'm saying, because it grates against that. And so the same thing is true for these guys from Real Social Dynamics. They're constantly coming and saying, oh, what you say is true, but it's angry. It's truthful anger. And and like every damn one of these sons of bitches is out there right now saying, oh, it's, go ahead and read Rollo, but don't, forget about it afterwards because it's kind of cynical or it's kind of angry. And it's not. It rubs you the wrong way because it doesn't fit in with your ego investments. It shatters, it's the catalyst for people to shatter their, blue pill illusions. And if your income depends on men having those illusions, then yeah, you've got to find some way to demonize that. And so it's not the information anymore, it's how the information was delivered. Yeah. So I think a lot of guys get confused and they think, I'm in this red pill rage and I got, I'm living in my mom's basement and the worst of the worst when it comes to that. Right. But are they doing that because they're genuinely angry at women? Are they doing that because they're angry at themselves? What are you angry for?
Is
it a waste of time? Is it like a loss of what do you call it, sunken cost? Is it because is that what it is? I think identifying what you're angry about is probably the first step, and then moving past that, because there's a lot of other steps in the stages of unplugging.
Totally, yeah. And what to Sean's question, I think that the best way to distill it is like a lot of these people that like question it or they'll try to criticize it and tear it apart. It's like the truth sounds like hate to people that hate the truth, sort of thing. Like
yes.
If it violates what they believe in, then they're going to try to poke at it like that.
If I can make a sports reference here with regards to women telling Rolla, hey, you would have a lot more women following you if you... I liken this to the LeBron James thing. Remember back in 2010, he was a free agent. He sits down, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach. Everybody in Cleveland burned his jersey, blah, 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 blah. And of course, they're doing the exit interviews from, I guess, the tire fires that were going on in downtown Cleveland. And they're like, well, why are you upset that... Well, it's not that LeBron James left. It's how he did it. No, it's that he did it. Check this out. I have never, ever heard a man tell me, you know what? Alicia broke up with me yesterday, but she handled it the right way. You know what? I'm okay with that. She handled it great. And, even though she cheated on me, she was real about it. I'm totally okay with her break. No, you're not. You are pissed off. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much you soften the truth. It's going to piss people off that it applies to. That's all there is to it. Women are upset with this because, again, Rollo takes this surgical approach, and subconsciously women think to themselves, holy shit, this guy's right, the jig is up. What can we do to disprove this guy? And so they try to disarm Rollo by saying, well, you'd have women following you if you soften the message. We ain't softening shit, man. Like, it is what it is.
We're not looking to help, well, I'm not going to say help, but I mean, like, we're not looking to gain a mass of women followers.
Right.
We're looking to just have open conversations that men want to have and need to have that will help them up their, game in life, and help them become better versions of themselves, to be more successful, to, live in a more fulfilled way.
I think that's the beauty of this convention, is we were talking about families, was the dad the angry one that came back? You're damn right. If I go home, I'm more angry than my wife. There's no blend of that. That's absolutely true. A lot of dads, though, don't know how to process it. A lot of men that have come up and have reproduced, they don't know how to process their own anger. They don't know how to channel that, so the kids don't. They never teach their sons, hey, here's how you channel this. So when they come to this, they're like, oh, shit, it's okay to be mad, and I can just push that, to go forward. A lot of people are mad about, we were talking about wasted time, and I'm always telling guys, everybody wants to go back to their weak sauce self and just smack them in the face, like, man, but you can't do that. That's not an option.
No time machine, man.
You can go forward. So you're going to spend your energy saying, I wish things were different, or you can spend your energy saying, I'm going to go forward to make sure that doesn't happen again. I'm not going to let that happen to me again. And then when you look at positive masculinity, I'm really glad you took that approach with the family, because I think that is absolutely necessary. We have men who don't know how to be a man themselves, trying to teach another man who's coming up a little version. You just can't do it. They need that energy. When
and
you got a book like that,
that's when you get the next Nicholas Cruz. That's when you get the next school
without
shooter.
Exactly.
Because that's been removed from that kick in the ass. That here's how you deal with anger, and how does a feminine primary society teach boys to process that like girls, like to emote more and to be more in touch with your feminine side. Like I always say, we teach boys as if they're defective girls, and so they don't have any clue to how to channel that into. I'm always discontent, but I'm creatively and constructively discontent. How do you teach that to a kid when the message he's getting is you need to be more like a girl, and you need to emote more, and you need to be more in touch with your emotions?
Here's what happens.
Expressive. So they're expressive with their emotions with an assault rifle.
Yeah, it's the whole, like, you got to get in touch with your masculinity, really. It's like, the whole, there's toxic masculinity, there's a problem, there's a lack of masculinity is what it is.
Yeah. And I'll go against the grain a bit on Rollo on this one too, where you talk about guy gets angry, but the girl doesn't accept it. And I don't like that, framing it as like a validation-seeking exercise. I know that's not your intent, but like for guys here who have been angry, and I've been this angry, when you're angry, you get into that fight mode. Same as Ed's probably seen boxing. I did when I was doing Taekwondo. You kind of get tunnel vision, and everything turns into a pinhole. The fact that it's not accepted by somebody else doesn't really enter into it. And that's where I like the benefit of that anger. You get angry, you want to fix something, like you were saying partially with the press too, where you kind of pull back. So at this point, it's me, period, and that's it. That's the only thing that enters into the equation. And there's an Evo Psych thing, which I'm going to horribly massacre about this, where the idea of guys getting angry is not irrational. It's a very rational signal that you're sending to the world, saying, I'm going to get violent if this perceived injustice of mine doesn't get addressed, which usually signals to others, like, get out of his way or help him out.
Real quick, I was going to say something about, like, we should start talking about how to deal with the anger phase. I mean, I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but if you're in the anger phase, if you've just found the red pill, go lift weights, take a boxing class. If you're angry, get the energy out. And as far as toxic masculinity is concerned, I think the only toxic masculinity that is displayed in Western culture comes really from women. Women are the ones that display the toxic masculinity here in 2018.
What do you mean?
Well, women display masculinity, the kind of masculinity that they, and again, women project their sexual desires onto men. They think that because they like masculinity, then we must like masculinity. So they become more masculine. And when a woman is masculine, it's unattractive. It kind of rubs people the wrong way. And women who believe that that's the right thing to do, they become hyper masculine. That's really when it becomes toxic, because they're messing things up for themselves and everyone else around them.
I hate the term. I wish it did, like, toxic masculinity. Every time I hear it, I'm like, it's ridiculous. But trying to find my version of a definition of that, the only toxic masculinity is repressed masculinity in a man. When you hold it back and you don't let it go out. That is the only thing that's toxic about it, because it builds up. You can't hide your programming. It's gonna go somewhere. And for a lot of guys, that's when they lash out of nowhere. And you're like, why are you mad? You're not mad about this. You're mad about the past 15 months where, you know, your wife wouldn't talk to you, touch you, or anything. That's what you're mad about. But you blew up on, little Timmy for spilling the paint because that's an outlet.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Just want to pass it over to Salk before we start taking questions.
No, and one of the things I view is anger is a reaction. It's a natural biological reaction, very much like fear, is that you're responding to a context. The difference is how do you process that and what do you choose to do? Courage is a reaction of choice. And so I think it's very common for guys to have a perceived injustice, particularly where it's dealing with their sex, their gender, their masculinity. That anger is a reaction to that perceived injustice. Now, the difference is how do you process that and what do you do about that? And the choice of courage is what separates masculinity that should be celebrated as opposed to that being repressed, and what you're saying, that toxic masculinity. And when you're being given advice at the time that does not work, that has already failed you, and you're being reintroduced to it again and again and again, it further compounds that toxic masculinity and that resentment. And you know it when you're receiving it.
It amplifies it.
All right, so we're going to start taking some questions here on this live broadcast. We've got a live audience, so if you guys want to queue up, there's going to be a mic available if you want to ask it. You can pose it to anybody on the panel, everybody on the panel, whatever works for you. But we've also got Sharp Assist in the comments looking for questions to pose to the panel. So if you have a question, you can pop it in there. Super chats are always appreciated. So fire away if you guys have questions. Do we have a mic out there?
Oh, some hard-hitting stuff. I'm really hoping for it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Start the day out right.
One of those things where one of us has to say, I don't know.
I don't have the answer to that one.
I will find out.
Yeah, I'll get back with you.
Can't say I don't know.
Well done.
Google it.
All right, thanks. So I come from an academic background, so I've seen that there's a lot of bias. You gotta publish to survive, and you can only publish stuff that kind of goes with the mainstream academic trend. So when you have more radical ideas, people tend to not want to publish that, and that's how you get like a lot of desperate PhDs that are trying to publish stuff that kind of goes with the mainstream so they can publish and get out. So Dr. Smith, what's your take? How can we kind of fix it a little bit? Or how is it, like, especially in psychology?
Well, in terms of publishing radical stuff, apparently you can reframe Mein Kampf in an intersectional feminist frame and get that published. So you can publish radical stuff as long as it's the right radical stuff. But I think
Bigfoot porn, I think it was.
Bigfoot porn, yeah.
I think what you're talking about is probably less radical stuff that appears radical to the people who are radical, I'm going to imagine. And so I'm not sure where you are in your career and what you're trying to achieve, but if you're in a research program and you actually want to get that degree, maybe you have to play the game a little bit in terms of not saying things that you don't believe, but at least keeping your mouth shut. When I went through my doctorate, I was in the clinical program, so I was surrounded by radical ideas in some quarters, but I was there to learn my clinical skills, so I kept my head down. I learned my clinical skills. I became a top-notch clinician, I hope, and I didn't say back then the things that I'm willing to say now because I wouldn't have got that piece of paper, that receipt that's hanging on my wall. But now I'm here. Now I'm a loudmouth. And there are people out there who are more academically oriented, like Dr. Deborah So. She got red-pilled, for lack of a better term, in academia when the types of things that she was saying didn't flow with the mainstream within that tiny little realm, and she was not radical enough for them. So she left academia. Now she's got, I think, 60,000 followers on Joe Rogan, and she's making a really big impact out there. She would not have 60,000 Twitter followers, and she's on Joe Rogan. She would not be doing that if she was in academia. So she's arguably having a much bigger impact what she's doing now outside of academia. Now the trade-off is that she doesn't have access to those resources, the research resources. But I think there's going to be a paradigm shift because the social sciences are becoming just so off track. I think that we're going to see research starting to take place off the college campus. So maybe you set a long view that if you're going to be researching and writing, you're going to be doing it outside of that horribly biased, intellectually lazy atmosphere that our universities have become.
And I just want to add to that too, guys, you don't need anybody's permission to talk or share your story today. You can write a blog, you can create a video, and you press the same upload button that Casey Neistat presses, that PewDiePie presses. If you have something that's of use in people's lives, You don't need the permission of a media outlet to publish your story. You could publish it yourself. It's just going to take a little bit longer. That's all.
That's true. I was also going to say is that this is not just endemic to psychology. It's now entering into hard sciences as well, where if you don't consider an ideological perspective in your research and your studies, like if science isn't feminist enough, then they'll
I know
it'll go down a memory hole. I don't know if you've probably read that same article about how they tested this to see if, or was it the peer review study, I think, where they were just writing just stuff that would get just nonsense science, and they wrote it in such a way that intersectional feminism would approve of it,
right?
And then put it up. But that's getting into even like STEM fields now too. So if you don't,
that was very much in the humanities. That was limited to some certain journals in the humanities that have a reputation for being just off the wall. But I know a physics professor that is getting pressured to include this social justice agenda in his physics classes. It has no business there. You know, he's just there to teach numbers and how things work. But the pressure on professors and any type of academic to put this stuff, the feminist ideology and the social justice ideology, in everything is tremendous.
Well, I think Jordan Peterson's a prime example of somebody that said, no, I'm not going to discuss these things in front of people, and he kind of took it to his own platform, and then he left his day job, he shut down his practice, and he's writing books and doing tour sort of things. So it's not that it's impossible. Yeah, it's hard. You're going to have to put in time. You're going to have to do the work. You're going to have to build an audience and say something that's of use to the audience. But I mean, just go out and do it. There's nothing stopping you from it.
I assume you're probably talking about red pill related material, Manosphere. Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah, so I was actually trying to point out you should do a red pill journal, peer reviewed by all you guys, kind of like that.
Oh, that'd be
pretty cool.
Yeah.
No, I'll be
we kind of
honest.
do that. We kind of do that every Saturday at 10.
I'll say from my standpoint, I've got a professional license, and that is very much at risk. It's not necessarily that my employer will fire me because of what I say. I think if he had his choice, he's known about this for a while. But it'll come down to a business decision. It'll be client-based. It'll be municipal work. And there isn't a whole lot of room for a man like me to sit down and say the things that I do about supporting families, supporting relationships, about supporting men and masculinity. Even within my profession, for example, there's a lot of drawback to the environmental issues that we're facing as architects designing in the built environment. It's not permissible to sit down and say there's actual cannibalization when you have a lead checklist that, for fees on a relatively mid-sized project runs, several $100,000, that's not cannibalizing program, building, space, quality material, because you're pulling on that budget string. You're supposed to ignore it. It's not that we can't do it, and we do it on a regular basis, and we'd advocate for it. But when you have an institutionalized political agenda that says you have to get it through our checklist program, and that's certification, and that certification supposedly doesn't cost money, I can tell you, I've seen the fee proposals because I write them. It does. And so there's a lot of pushback on a lot of that. But you're not allowed to say it, and if you do, your career is going to be impacted by it. And that's very, very real, whether it's in a STEM course or an academic setting. I see it on a day-to-day basis in my professional practice.
On a lower level, look what happened to Roosh recently, and I think that's definitely a real concern. Okay, so let's say you publish a book or two or three. At some point, you either have to play the game, as it were, or you let it ride. And there's a very real possibility that you could put something out there that could be possibly banned by, Amazon or whatever the case may be. So I think that's definitely a real concern.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily what you do in the now. It can be what you did before.
Absolutely.
A long time
Yes.
ago.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
You better believe
There's
it.
no
Yep.
limitation period on
There's no statute of
anything.
limitations.
But a lot of guys
It doesn't
used to
even
do
have
in
to
the
be
Renaissance.
supported by evidence too, right?
I just saw one of the
forbid.
chat comments here. This is also getting into, like I said, the hard sciences, but also like into computer coding. There's an effort on the part of
the Linux stuff?
the Linux kernel stuff right now, where they're trying to say, you guys are ideologically approved coders, and you guys are not. When Linux has always been an open source thing, so that's another really scary aspect of what you're saying.
Yeah, back in the Renaissance too, I'll do this one quick. What a lot of guys used to do, because back then you couldn't be an atheist, you'd be murdered at the stake when you're talking to the priests in the Catholic Church. They would say these arguments that were basically the atheistic argument, but then ended off as, and this is the justification why Christianity is real. So if you do that kind of tongue-in-cheek one where people that get it will get it and people that don't, there's historical precedence there. So you could always say, well, toxic masculinity is wrong and here's all the science or why it's wrong. But that's the conclusion then is, of course it's right. But then everybody who reads between the lines kind of get it.
Yeah.
The question was about uploading, getting that stuff out there, and just there is a lot of great content out there. Before that's swiped out and the rug's pulled, make sure you're grabbing it. Make sure you're documenting that, downloading, doing whatever you can to make sure you got your files.
You have to be litigious.
Yeah. All right. Do we have another question lined up? Can't really see behind the mic back there.
Yes. Hello, gentlemen.
What's up?
This question is also for Dr. Smith. My question is, before you mentioned that there's a blind spot regarding gender dynamics in the psychology field, I would say, ask, what are your theories as to the origin of this blind spot? Would you say this was a cause after the sexual revolution, or it could have gone further back?
I don't think there's anything nefarious in psychology's blind spot. I don't think there's anything intentional about it. Now, there certainly is a lot of social justice and intersectional feminism that has made its way into research psychology, not so much into the clinical side, out in the trenches. But I think that where the bias and the blind spot comes from is just the tendency for researchers for the last 50 years to want to look at successful marriages. And so successful marriages are very much what I suppose this group will call a blue pill paradigm. And since that's where the research takes place, that's where the numbers are, and there's this whole other realm that evolutionary psychology can talk to, but not so much clinical psychology.
Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think anybody else has anything to...
Yeah. Hey, Redmond. Red pill rage in general, can lead to bitterness, and you've alluded to the choices people make after they go through the red pill rage. Sometimes they disconnect, sometimes they re-engage and grow. What do you all do, especially those of you who organize or coordinate communities, blogs online, to manage bitterness if it comes through in those communities? And what would you recommend to other folks who are looking to do the same with their blogs and
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'll take that one first, if that's okay. So I've got a private men's community, and we get a lot of guys that join it, and a lot of the discussion is kind of tailored to stuff that, like conversation pieces that matter to men, and we don't want to be judged or criticized, for those discussions. And of course, there's somebody that will always join new, and they'll be like, wow, this comment looks like it's really, coming from a place of anger, and, do you hate women or something like that? And it's like, I think it's unanimously understood from some of the more seasoned members that have been in the community for quite a bit longer. It's like, if you shine a light on something that doesn't particularly flatter one of the sexes, it's just pointing to truths and facts, and you can't blur that. I mean, you could try to go back to the blue pill paradigm and pretend like you don't know it, but it's like saying women aren't always going to be sugar and spice and all things nice, and they're capable of doing things that can drive men to suicide. Going through the divorce machine is very tough for many men. So when you have those conversations, sometimes it's difficult, and some people aren't ready to hear that direct, honest, cold, hard truth sort of thing. And you just kind of have to have that conversation. Hey, look, guys, we're not angry here. We're not hating the other sex or anything, or hating a sex, for example. It's just it is what it is. These are the sorts of things that happen.
I think what men in particular have to understand, that women are neither good or bad. They just are.
They're just women,
I think,
yeah.
right. Yep. They're just women. They take the shape of the container that they're put in. And hear people all the time talk about, men and women alike will only treat them the way you allow them to. Well, women can't do anything without men. They couldn't even do feminism without men. So, I mean, seriously, feminism isn't around unless, men co-sign onto this thing. Not to say that we're responsible for it, but when it comes down to it, I think a lot of men have to understand that you teach women how to treat you, and if you give women direction, then she will follow. She has to be ready to take that direction. But as far as becoming angry with the world and angry with women, at some point you're just going to have to accept the fact that this is how it is. Just like Richard said, it is what it is. And at some point the anger starts to lead. You want to place the anger somewhere, and women are the easy target. But listen, we're all born with the inherent understanding of the difference between right and wrong. We were all complicit in our own demises with women. I mean, it's not like we were perfect boyfriends or husbands. We fucked up too, just like they fucked up. So I think you have to understand that women were not inherently out to get us. They're doing what they've been allowed to do. And I think when you can accept that, that's when you can move on from the anger phase.
And it's not just, women pointing the finger. It's dudes too. Like I get just as much, from like the white knights, the feminized boys that were raised in a single mother household,
I hate those guys.
Are you angry? Why are you so angry?
Why, are you mad, bro?
And that's like, dude.
Like Pat Campbell was saying that, like, when I go on his show on Fridays, and when I first started in, the women were kind of concerned, his female listeners were kind of concerned about what I was saying, but they mostly agreed with me.
Yeah, but you guys find it they
and then it's
love it.
mostly the guys.
It's the dudes, yeah.
It's mostly the guys that are going, because it's opening their eyes to something that they don't want to look at. Like,
well, I think guys are just so used to, like, swooping in and rescuing these
exactly, and they feel, because they've always been
attention.
taught to identify with the feminine. They've always been, the blue pill teaches guys to identify with the feminine, because that has always been a means for them to get to intimacies. The more you're all alike,
which hasn't really worked out well.
Which is what I always say, is that polarity is actually the key to a healthy relationship.
That's what I say to white knights when they go, not all women are like that. You do understand she's not going to sleep with you.
Dude, I love that, because it hits right to the
core.
core.
Still won't fuck each other.
Because you notice not a single guy argues that. They know that's exactly what it is.
That's right.
Well, more to the question, though, is what I tell guys is that you have more hope in a red pill paradigm than you did in your blue pill paradigm, because you were living in by this set of rules, this old social contract that you now are cut away from, and you now know that was something that is neither desirable nor really even true. But now that you have red pill awareness, you can live and create new goals for yourself and become somebody that you want to be, that the blue pill doesn't. What does it say? That I think it was a line in the Matrix where it says, Neo is like driving around and talking about all these, when he finally goes back into the Matrix, and he's looking at the Matrix again, but now he's unplugged and he's looking at it for the first time.
The noodles.
And he said something about I have all these memories of a life that never existed. Right. What does that mean? And then Trinity says it means that the Matrix can't tell you who you are anymore.
You can't unsee this dream.
Yes, and that I thought was really kind of poignant, because that's really kind of how it works. Is once you can't unsee it. You can't take the red pill lenses off. You're going to see what's going to be there. So why not make the best of it? Why not be angry for a little bit, do what you have to do. Don't dwell in that anger, but move on from that and build a better life for you. New hope in a red pill paradigm.
Yeah, it's like with that comes the burden of performance.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is that it's. And this is people have heard this quote before. It's the red pill isn't here so that you will hate women. It's so that you won't hate them for what they can't be for you.
Ooh,
right.
Wow.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That's good.
Cool. Do we have another question from the audience?
Yes, sir. How you doing, gentlemen?
What's up, Charles?
So a question for you guys, and this is more directed towards the gentlemen with children. How do you go about having your legacy, your mission statement survived if something happens to you? This is commonly seen in the military, so you still continue on the proper growth through a masculine masculine figure and a strong feminine figure after you die, and you're not there training or guiding or leading, so to speak.
I'll jump on that one.
Go ahead.
So you set the standard from which everything's going to be measured. They're going to follow your example, not your advice. You can say you want to leave a legacy where you've got a strong son who's going to go forward, claim what's his. You're going to have a strong daughter who's going to be feminine and raise a great family. But if you and your wife are going at it nonstop, if you're a supplicating man who's walking on eggshells all the time, that's what he's going to follow. It doesn't matter what you say. You can throw him the rational male, but he's going to look at you. He could read that. There's great content in there, but he's basing his actions off you as the father. So you start with yourself. You start by fixing you. You start by creating the dynamic in the relationship and the marriage or whatever it is you have going on with those children are growing up in, for them to see, hey, this is how I interact. This is how the men and women are. And then you go out and you create that rite of passage for your son. You also create a rite of passage for your daughter. Just because she's a female, you understand your son more because you've been a young man. You've never been a little girl, I don't think. So, but still, you play an equal role in her development of understanding. That is what a man is. That is how the role I'm supposed to support. You know, women are complementary to a man's life. Men and women are equivalent. They're not equal. So when you're bringing them up in a unique manner. You know, you can't treat your son like your daughter. You can't treat your daughter like your son. They're different. So for that to continue on, you set that standard. You know, you instill what your code is into your children and what you want them to carry on, and you let them know, like, hey, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. You know, when they talk about raising red pill and red pill parenting, you know, I don't call it that. I just call it parenting. That's proper parenting. You're teaching them the realities of the world. You know, you're not repressing your son and the way he wants to express himself, because that's what young children are. They're the raw development of the masculine and the feminine. They're not yet infected, you know, at that age. But society's going to come at them. It's going to come at them early. You dictate what they see on TV. You dictate the books, the shows that are going on. You know, you decide whether you're going to bring your children out to have experiences. You decide whether you're going to give them presents and buy them things and create a tablet toddler, or you're going to give them presents, which is you going places, doing things, and learning what it's about to be in the world and what it is to become a good, functional human adult.
You can also leave a dent in the universe.
Sorry to interrupt, but what I mean is, if you passed away, something happened to you and you died, and then you're left with the mother and the children, how do you go about making sure that your legacy survives through the widow?
Like after you die?
I don't think anybody really knows when they're going to die.
I'm a ghost tonight.
Right?
I give lessons.
No, but it's not like, I don't think anybody really knows when they're going to die. Like when your time comes, it comes sort of thing, right? So I mean, it's like you just live in the present, in the moment. It's like the power of now. You sort of kind of, you know, get out what you need to like teach at that time. And hey, you know, if you're gone, like my daughter's 9. I mean, if I'm gone tomorrow, all right. I mean, you know, I've done the best that I can, you know, the time that I have, and, you know, hopefully, you know, there's going to be a masculine man in her life at some point somewhere else. It's, you know, it's going to fill in the gap. Maybe, maybe not. But one of the things that I was going to say, guys, is it's like, you know, you don't even have to have kids to leave that legacy. Mm-hmm. You know, I had a guy the other night when, you know, it was after the event kind of wrapped up after the posts and comments. And he was like, you know, I wrote down a goal like 2 nights ago, and it's like, I am going to speak at this event in the future. And he didn't have an audience, he didn't have a blog, he doesn't have a YouTube channel. Like, nobody's listening to what he has to say, but he wants to say something. And you can put a dent in the universe. Like, you can put a dent in people's lives. Even though they don't carry your DNA or your last name, you can impact them, and they can continue to share that message, and that's powerful.
And you can go into that dent in the universe and people's lives. If you're concerned about your wife surviving you, your child surviving you,
that's like life insurance questions more. Like.
Yeah, but put a dent in their
Don't
lives.
tell her about the life insurance.
Make sure that there's a void of your absence because you were such a positive influence, and people that will carry and resonate through well beyond your years. You know, I fully expect. I hope to hell so that my daughter lives past me. And so, you know, my job between now and then is in this moment of now to be there to make that connection and make that presence known, and that so she will have had that father for whatever period of time she has, you know, with me, and that I make sure that that's a priority in my life, and that she knows that. That's not a subliminal element, that there is a very overt intention of being a parent and being there for that child and making that dent in that life, not just the whole universe, but in that life and hers. And I am totally focusing on doing that.
Yeah, and I want to add something here. I think that, excuse me, I love that question because there's an awareness of death. And if you really want to be red-pilled, you really want to know how the world works, remind yourself every day that this could be the last one. Like, you might not make it home. And the work that you do while you're here it has a tremendous impact. Like, Rich and I have daughters that are similar ages, and I know that if I don't make it home, that most of the work that I've done with her, like, as cheesy as it sounds, she's going to go out and find somebody that acts like I acted. And so if she never sees me again, she's got 11 years with me where hopefully I've created some kind of good model that she can go out and reproduce. And the next few years are going to matter too if I'm lucky enough to have those. But this awareness that, today could be the last day, that's a very important red pill moment for everybody, I think.
Well, everybody knows I have a daughter.
Also, what's the greatest quality of your great-great-grandfather?
That's a great question.
Can you remember that?
Can you
I'm
kind of
find
putting
that
it in
out?
perspective.
I know, that's true. And well, everybody knows I have a 20-year-old daughter. I've watched her grow from infancy to where she is right now. And I'll tell you, there's nothing like seeing your daughter look for qualities that you possess or the things that you've modeled and you've been the template of masculinity for her. There's nothing like seeing her be attracted to that in another guy. And,
Yeah, like you
Oh,
see
she likes
that
guys
in
with
her
Ibanez
boyfriend,
guitars?
right?
yeah, no, but I mean, quality. Yeah. Well, hobbies are one thing. He does share hobbies with me, which is kind of scary in a way. But my daughter's got a long-term boyfriend right now, and it's really interesting. It's funny how well I get along with the guy, and it's because I modeled and demonstrated, behavior and general understandings of who I am, what I'm about, and it helps that her mom's that we're still together, and then it works out really well for us. But as far as getting to your quote or your question about leaving an impact. I'm kind of like the wrong guy to ask because it's like I've done 3 books. I think that's probably a pretty good impact on the world. But I do think, and I've written about this before, is I sometimes wonder like what my great grandchildren are going to think about old Uncle Rollo or old Grandpa Rollo and say, what was he thinking back then? Or these are timeless truths. I mean, I've always said that the rational male is like a living text, and you can keep coming
let's hope
back
that's
to
evergreen.
it.
I'd say your book's going to last more than your legacy.
Oh well,
Yeah.
it'll outlive me. But and that's weird for me to say because like it seems like life is so temporal, But once you put something out there, and I'm impacting lives, through this convention and just through the stuff that I do, and like I said, it's kind of humbling to me, but then I also know that at least I've left something behind for not just my family to benefit by the other people's benefit.
All right, so let's try to keep it tight because we got 2 more
we
Red
got
Man
a few.
groups to run today, and we'll go for another 10 more minutes. So if we have anybody else in the audience that has questions, let's fire them out.
Yeah, hey guys. So my question is revolving around the anger phase, and I've heard it said in some circles that anger often is over top of some sort of fear. And I wanted to get your opinion as to whether you agree or disagree with that statement, and if you agree with it, what would typically be the fear that you would see in the anger phase of the unplugging?
I think it's more for Sean. You want to start with that?
Well, it's been pretty well documented, and I find it to be compelling and reliable research that men tend to go to anger because it's a more powerful emotion. You can get things done with it, and from an adaptive perspective, it makes more sense if you're out, trying to slay the woolly mammoth or whatever it is, and you get hurt. It makes a lot more sense to get angry than it does to get sad and immobilized. And so, what was the heart of your question? Like,
ultimately, if there's fear underneath that anger.
Yeah. Well, the fear, I think Rich touched on it earlier, is anger is a lot of times a reasonable reaction to injustice, and so the anger, if there's a fear behind it, somebody goes through family court, for example, the fear is, well, I don't want that to happen again, and the fear also of, well, I was wrong about a lot of things. I was living my life one way, and it turns out that the world doesn't work the way I thought it worked, and that's a difficult thing to sit with. So I suppose it varies from man to man, but one of the things I was thinking about earlier, and I'll keep this quick because I know we're keeping it tight, but that it used to be that when a man got depressed and immobilized, there would be some motivation for him to get back out into the community. So 100 years ago, a guy could go through something similar that he could go through now, and he might retreat into his home, but his home's going to get boring after a while, and there's going to be some compulsion to go back out into the world. And now the home is the most entertaining place on the planet, and it's very easy, I think, for men to settle into their anger and never get to your question, what's really going on behind this for me?
I think a lot of it comes from, and Hunter touched on this briefly a little bit earlier, it's embracing the masculine burden of performance. When guys find the red pill, men are smart. And when a man sees the rational male, or he sees my show, or he watches the Red Man Group, a lot of guys do the math very quickly. And they figure out, okay, it's obviously very possible to live the life that I want to live, but what is the cost associated with that? And they do the math in their head very, very quickly, and they figure out that they either can't do it or that they won't. And I think that's the fear. that fear is sort of a manifestation of the anger. The anger to me is displaced, and I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but I think that anger comes from the fact that they know, they're like, shit, I know I could live this life, but I know that I can't, or I'm not disciplined, or I won't. I'm not going to be willing to pay this price. So I think that's where a lot of that fear comes from, is because the masculine burden of performance is a burden. It's not easy to be up here doing what we're doing. I talked about this in my speech. It is not easy to live this. You think I can get hired anywhere? Right? You know what I mean? Like, there's a price to be paid, and a lot of guys think, man, I don't want to pay that price, but I still want to be able to live that life, and it's sort of an inner conflict.
Yeah. Do we have another question?
That's about all the time we have, gentlemen. Rich?
Okay. All right, guys, thank you. Let's just wind it down. We're going to go across the panel, just remind you who everybody all is. Rollo Tomassi of The Rational Male, Hunter Drew of TheFamilyAlpha.com, Donovan Sharp of The Sharp Reality. You can find him on Patreon. I've got Socrates here of ManningUpSmart.com, Ryan Stone of The Mary Red Pill, and Dr. Sean T. Smith of The Tactical Guide to Women and DocSmith.co. So we will be back with another Red Man group in, Anthony, I'm guessing like 20 minutes or so?
Yeah, 15-minute commercial break.
All right, so we'll take a bit of a break. We'll load up a slightly different panel, get into a different topic, so make sure you tune in for that. And thanks again for checking this one out. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Thank you.